We've recently learned about all the buffs and nerfs that are coming in the mid-season patch for Season 2 in 2.5, and there has been a lot of conversation about various characters and strategies that are getting fundamentally changed, but there are a couple of characters that have received some changes that change the fundamental gameplay loop of a character at their core level, and the character I want to talk about most today is Thor. My Thor guide is one of the most watched on YouTube, and a lot of people have learned to play Thor through my guides, and I personally have grinded Thor a ton. I got to Eternity last season playing a lot of Thor as well. So I really wanted to break down these changes and talk about why I think it's a huge misstep for the character. It ruins what we love about Thor and completely changes his play style, but I think I'm getting a little too far ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about what exactly the changes are and what they do and what they actually don't do. So basically, this is how they changed Thor. They changed his alternate fire. So now you no longer use Thor Force with that alternate fire, his hammer throw, and now it's on a cooldown that gains you Thor Force for each enemy hit. They also did decrease the damage as well, but this changes a couple important things about Thor. Number one, he has constant access to Thor Force now. You're going to be able to get basically unlimited Thor Force very easily between your bubble, between your alternate fire, and between you being able to hit enemies after you use an ability. You're going to be getting a lot of Thor Force, and this is part of what they envision as his new playstyle, which we'll talk about more in a second. But there's a cost here, and the cost is now when he uses Thor Force, instead of gaining 100 HP, he's only going to be gaining 75 bonus health, and he has a cap of 150 instead of 200. So they're dramatically decreasing his survivability, because you got to think about it this way. Every time he used a shift or used a fly, a movement ability, he was gaining 100, and now he's only getting 75, and he could have up to 200, and now he can get only 150. So it's a lot less survivability, but the benefit is that you get a ton of Thor Force. Now, you lose some other things, like his animation cancel, we'll talk a little bit more about in a second, but the basic idea here is that now Thor is a character that gets to non-stop use Awakening, and we see it in the preview that they showcased to us, because I think there was a lot of outrage, so they just showed us some clips and some footage about how this interaction would work. And basically what it is that Thor gets to spam Awakening. You get to pop into this mode, spam a ton of lightning bolts, and then, you know, get your Thor Force back and do it again, and get your Thor Force back and do it again. And by the time you cycle through all those things, you're gonna get another cooldown, and you could almost just keep spamming Awakening mode indefinitely. Non-stop, you're gonna be throwing these lightning bolts, and what this ultimately does to Thor is it pushes him really far away from a lurker playstyle or even a mobility dive at times playstyle, and more towards a poke heavy Thor. What I mean by this is you are going to be spamming a lot of damage down lanes, you are going to be spamming a lot of damage on the front lines, and you are not going to be targeting certain things around the map, flying around looking for key weaknesses and isolations, booping people out of position, trying to punish people that are out of position. These are all of the things that people really loved about Thor. And if we get to a fundamental core like understanding of what this is, it's an off-tank role that we've seen in other hero shooters like Overwatch. That's what Thor is doing. He's playing this off-tank role that gets a lot of flexibility and freedom and the ability to impact the battlefield in a lot of different ways. And what they're doing is they're subbing a lot of that strength out, a lot of that power out, a lot of that identity out for a Thor that instead gets an increased power at playing safe with his team and applying damage and pressure to the front line. Now, why would they do this in the first place? Why did they take away what Thor was good at and unique at, and they kind of move it towards something different? Well, one of the things that you could notice if you kind of zoom out and take a look at the patch in its entirety is that this patch is a massive buff to poke across the board. When we see buffs to characters like Hawkeye and Hela, and characters like Magneto, who's already strong and Strange, and nerf to more brawl-based compositions and dive-based strategies, we are seeing a dramatic rise in poke. Poke was the composition that was the most popular in the early stages in both Alpha and in the early stages Season 0 and in the beginning of Season 1. So if I'm being honest with you, these were times that people really enjoyed the gameplay loop of the game more than they have recently, and I think that in order to create a sort of stability in the meta and then to move out from there slowly, they they want to go back to something that people like and enjoy, right? They know people didn't have a problem with poke. They know people liked poke. People weren't frustrated with it like they are with dive and some other compositions. So they're going back. They're going back to poke, and they're buffing basically everything that has to do with poke. And in that process, I think they've turned Thor into a character that plays into poke. He can play really well into poke. He is more pokey. He is more long distance, frontline oriented than he's ever been in the past, and far less lurk, roamer, off tank oriented than he ever was previously. Now, there's one big result here that I really dislike more than anything, is that it limits Thor's identity as far as what he can do. Like, there is a world where he's actually stronger in this playstyle than he was before, but every Thor main would tell you that they would prefer a weaker Thor that is allowed to play the way that he's always played, versus a Thor that is heavily incentivized to play in a way that limits your creativity and flexibility. And it's also dramatically lowering his skill ceiling, because even like the animation cancel is no longer there. And the animation cancel with his alternate fire was something that a lot of Thors used to get bursts of damage, to destroy pieces of utility, because you could use it on any, you know, any type of destructible, whether that's a BRB or something, and pop that and move on really quickly, get a quick burst of damage and then fly away. You could stay really hyper mobile. So not only is your decision trees a lot more limited now, and you're disincentivized for making some of these more complex decisions, but also the actual mechanical skill is less as well. And I'm mostly confused about what their plan is for Thor in the future in the first place, because I think that Thor had some things that he did very uniquely and really powerfully, and they have taken away some of those things and they doubled down on other things. Because most people would tell you that Thor's problems was his actual survivability, and they sacrificed that, and they're like, you won't need this level of survivability because you're going to be playing safe anyways. You're going to be poking on the front line, which is what no Thor has ever really wanted to do. Like, we'll do it in the loop, but it's one of the many things that we'll do because we could do so many different things, and now we're disincentivized from doing those things. So I don't understand their vision for the character, and I really feel the frustration that a lot of Thor players have with where they're moving this character, because to me it just doesn't make any sense. And here's what I would have personally done to Thor, because I don't think that Thor needed anything dramatic. I think that Thor was a character that was still playable. I still will force him, even though I'm not winning a ton of games. I'll still force him and make him work at times. And the things that I would have done to make Thor better going into the mid-season is I would have given him more options, basically increasing his decision-making trees. So what I mean by that is I would give him the option to cancel his awakening. I would give him the option to cancel his ultimate. So, you know, if you pop an awakening and you want to just cancel it and run away, you could pop it and get, you know, whatever percentage back or whatever threshold back of your, you know, what you spent, and then you could fly away. Or maybe you get one back if you cancel it early or whatever. And then your ultimate, you don't have to slam down into a Luna ult after you baited it. You know, you get to pop it and cancel it or do something like that. And then I would have probably slightly increased his movement speed, which also buffs his ultimate a bit as well, because he's moving faster in air. But it also double downs on that more off-tank roaming playstyle of Thor that is very flexible. And all of these increase the decision-making trees of the character, and they're not massive buffs to the point that's going to make Thor all of a sudden take over the meta and dominate every game. So I don't understand the idea here that instead of doing these minor, almost quality of life change buffs or minor buffs to the character that a lot of Thor players would be really happy with, that wouldn't break the character or make him any better than he is now on super niche already tank, to be honest with you. In my opinion, I had him pegged as one of the worst tanks compared to other tanks. Not that he's a weak character or anything like that. There's just so many powerful tanks out there. And these minor buffs to Thor would have actually pushed him in a reasonable direction to, you know, not make him busted, not make him meta, but still make him enjoyable and further increase the things that he's already good at. But instead, they went a completely different direction with this character. And like I said, there's a good chance that Thor is actually better now, post changes, than he was before. But just like I made the argument with Rocket, because I made a Rocket video, and to be honest with you, I know Thor much more deeply than I know Rocket. And to speak from the fun angle, I want a weaker Thor that is allowed to play the way that he's always played, the way that I want to play him, over a stronger Thor that has to play in a completely different playstyle, and I think most people would agree. Now, granted, I think he could have been a bit stronger and still not have impacted the meta in any meaningful way, and all of us would have been happy with some of the changes I recommend, but I really wanted to make this video talking about why I think this was such a misstep, and one of the changes that I think really just do a disservice to the community of people that have, you know, really grinded Thor and learned Thor and put time and effort into Thor. And as a general rule of thumb, I say this a lot with every change: buff or nerf a character's power level, don't fundamentally change their gameplay loop. You can make a character strong or weak in the meta without ruining what makes people enjoy the character, love the character, like the character. You could do that, and I would highly recommend that they double down on those things rather than changing a character that a lot of people love, a lot of people really like grinding, into something that he really never was supposed to be, and is basically turning him into a character that we didn't really enjoy in the first place. Now, of course, this is just one man's opinion on the character, but I do want to pass the question off to you. Do you agree or disagree with my analysis on Thor? Are you excited to try him? Are you optimistic, or are you really pissed off? Let me know in the comments down below. Smash the like and subscribe if you enjoy the content, and I'll see you next time.